We're back here in the final segment of our program on hurricanes and talking about the great hurricane of 1928, the great Okeechobee hurricane. Wayne Neely is here today. And Wayne, tell me, when I read your book, I saw photographs of coffins being transported to West Palm Beach, Florida, for mass burial in the Woodlawn Cemetery.
That was the white bodies.
That's for the white bodies.
Yeah, the blacks were on Tamron Avenue and 25th Avenue.
Tamron Avenue.
Yes.
There's a vacant land.
They got a backhoe and a deep grave and just put them in there. And many of the black workers didn't even know where their parents or whoever died, their relatives died in that storm because they never documented them.
What is at that spot now?
Right now, actually prior to, this storm was actually, I call it the forgotten storm, both in the United States and the Bahamas, because to this day, you still don't have any idea that a storm, such a great storm, is not memorialized here, not here or United States. The United States government never really recognized the storm until 2003. Prior to that, the mass grave, they had a slaughterhouse built over the grave. They had a road running through the grave as well. And they had also had another business on the grave itself. And there were persons petitioned the government and petitioned the governor and the president to have this grave recognized as a sacred ground and as a national treasure. And for many years, one of them who is a good friend of mine, Robert Hazard, he organized that and he got them, he pleaded and he got on their cases everything for about 10, 15 years, just asking them to recognize this grave. And in 2003, they did two things. First of all, they recognized it as a national sacred site. So it's like the Grand Canyon and any other historical site in the United States. It now has federal funding. It also has recognition in all the historical works in the United States. And they moved the slaughterhouse from there. They also moved the road, and they now have it nice manicured as site where black persons died in that storm.
Interesting. And there is a monument there.
Yeah, they have a monument there.
Yes.
To Okeechobee. It's a man, a woman, and a child running from the storm. Running from the storm.
Yes. It says a memorial sculpture of a family fleeing the killer storm of 1928 was commissioned by the Belle Glade Bicentennial Committee.
Right.
And so it was...
It was done for the 75th anniversary of the storm. And what also happened prior to 2003...
It's in Belle Glade?
Yes, in Belle Glade. The official documentation was 1,836 persons who died in the storm prior to 2003. And the National Hurricane Center upped that total because they realized that that total was significantly too low. And they have in the record books, and it's now called, and they have in quotation mark, at least 2,500 persons.
You raised an interesting point earlier about what the Bahamian government has done or not done about this. And we're not hearing about this until you did the research.
Yes.
And until your book came out many months ago.
Yes.
And still yet nothing official has been done by the government of the Bahamas or by the Bahamian people.
No, and it's the same thing with other storms as well. And when I wrote this book, I didn't think about that avenue. But when I wrote this book, for example, after I read the 1929 book, I went on television one time to promote it, and I got like about 50 persons call, and every single time I go on a talk or show, someone would call me and tell me, look, my grandmother or my grandfather died in that storm. And it's with every book that I write. And I only wish that I could get their recollections before I actually write the book. But in many cases, after I write the book, and I get a lot of persons calling me and said, look, my parents wanted to be, for example, in 1929, my parents wanted to be from Nassau to Andros in the boat with Run Come See Jerusalem, the Pretoria. And she said, look, my granddaddy was on a boat, my grandmother, and they died. See, my mother never knew my dad, my father or my mother. So, and it's the same thing. Every time I get calls upon calls telling me, look, my parents or my grandparents, they always told me about the storm. They told me that their family relatives died in that storm, and that's I don't do it for the money. I do it for the recognition of a vital part of our Bahamian history.
There was another big storm that affected Andros, where a lot of people died in the 40s, I think it was.
Yes. It was 1930. There was the Abaco hurricane in 1932, and there was the Treasure Coast hurricane in 1933, and I think there was one in 1938 that impacted Andros.
Yes, but there's one in which Bishop A.C. Simonet perished, coming from Andros.
Oh, I think that's 42, I think.
1942.
Yes.
You're going to be writing about the 42 hurricane at some point in time.
I have two
in the future.
Yes, I'm doing 42, and there's one in 1850, also very deadly, so I'm working on those as well. And I'm also updating my previous book, the major hurricanes to affect the Bahamas.
That 1942 was especially bad.
Yes.
Because a boat was destroyed coming from Andros, isn't that right?
Yes, several boats were destroyed in that one. And one particular boat, there was a boat in Mangrove Key, I think it was called. I can't remember the name, but there was one in Mangrove Key where several persons went down in that storm.
And it seems as though a whole lot of Androsians perished in these storms coming through the Bahamas. Andros was particularly impacted.
Yeah, Andros is pretty vulnerable. For example, it's one of the reason why I hit Andros, the location. Andros is such a big island.
And the depth of the ocean?
Yes, and the ocean as well. And you also have Andros is the fifth deadliest area to be impacted by a hurricane. Grand Bahama and Abaco are number 2, 3, and Andros number 5. So
it is because of the depths of the waters around these islands.
Yes, and a lot of times even the warm waters of the ocean, which is what the hurricanes feed off. So instead of dying when it hits land area, in a lot of cases the warm ocean waters actually strengthen the hurricane itself.
Right, and so New Providence is protected more,
very well protected
than those other islands.
Yes.
Eleuthera is pretty bad, especially on the northern side.
Yes.
Abaco is bad.
Yes.
Because it is not sheltered as
New Providence is. Yes. And New Providence on the list. I think Andros, Abaco, and Grand Bahama, and Andros, and those are impacted significantly more than New Providence. New Providence is number 39 on the list.
Yes.
Yes. So New Providence is very sheltered. I think it has to do with our location and a bit of luck.
And what occurred to me is that Inagua is not as severely impacted from these hurricanes when they are devastating islands in the southeast.
No, because first of all, Inagua and those southeastern islands, they're closer to Turks and Caicos. They're closer to Haiti. They're closer to Puerto Rico. They're closer to Cuba. They're sheltered from the south.
Right.
So if a storm comes, they have to hit those islands first. And once they hit those islands first, they tend to be weakened by the mountains of Cuba and of the Dominican Republic. So to a sense, the southeastern islands are buffered by those type of storms.
So those storms, they pick up steam, so to speak, when they hit around the Acklands, Crooked Island area.
Yes,
they tend
to be
coming to the northwest.
One notable example would be Michelle. Michelle came over, and most of those storms, once they come from that location, what we call a Southern Caribbean Sea type hurricane, they head northward from its inception, and they hit either, like I said, they hit Puerto Rico, they hit Dominican Republic, or they hit Cuba. And all those islands tend to break the storm apart, so which means that the Bahamas or the southeastern Bahamas get a weaker storm than if they were not impacted by those islands to the south.
But when they come around Andros,
and they come sometimes north of Puerto Rico, and they come through the island chain, that's when they're pretty strong.
Now, as we said, Katrina now was formed in the central Bahamas. It did not pick up steam until some days later.
Yeah, Katrina formed just east of the Bahamas. It was tropical. It formed as Tropical Depression number 10.
Right.
From what you call a TUT low or upper level low pressure system, and it moved to the Bahamas as a depression number 10. And once it left the Bahamas, it went across what you call the Gulf Loop current, and it picked up intensity, significant intensity, and it became a Category 3 hurricane, and that's why it devastated New York. Because with the Gulf of Mexico area, it's a pretty warm area. It's very sheltered, so the waters are very warm, and so once it hit that warm water, it basically exploded exponentially.
We've been having some hot days, Mr. Neely.
Yes.
And people are wondering whether or not we are going to have hurricanes.
Well, this year they're going for below average hurricane season. And I'm scared because when I tell people that, they tend to let their guards down. They think that, we won't get any storm. Or they say it's going to be below average. In other words, they don't prepare. They don't make sure the insurances are up to date. They make sure that their homes are not insured because they say it's below average season. And I always remind them about Hurricane Andrew. Hurricane Andrew occurred when we had a below average hurricane season. Andrew was only 7 named storms that year in Hurricane Andrew. That was in 1992. You had 3 hurricanes and 1 major hurricane, which was only Hurricane Andrew. And it defined the region it defined the region for a hurricane because it decimated the Bahamas as we know it. I think it brought the former Prime Minister a greater degree of relevance to the Bahamas, because the first job he had to do was not to gloat on his victory. The first thing he had to do was actually go toward the Bahamas and make provision to get the Bahamas back to some degree of normalcy. And that was a below average season, and it's one of the most expensive hurricanes that we had hit the Bahamas, and it's the second most expensive hurricane in the United States. It cost $26.5 million in the United States and $250 million in the Bahamas.
It did a whole lot of damage in South Florida, and people in South Florida still remember
that storm. Yes. And even in South Florida, I speak to several of the governors, and a lot of the persons say that people in South Florida, they're more hurricane prone now than ever before because of things like Andrew. Andrew was a storm that woke up not only Florida but the entire United States about the danger of hurricanes.
We are still not awakened in many parts of the Bahamas.
No. And I travel to many of the islands, and a lot of them, they don't seem concerned about hurricanes, except when I went to North Eleuthera and when I went to Grand Bahama after Francis Jane and Wilma. I went to Grand Bahama.
They would remember.
They remember, and I can guarantee you that many of those are going to make sure they're insured, make sure they prepare the next time they hear storms coming. For example, in North Eleuthera, a lot of fishermen, a lot of Spanish, when those goes out at sea, before they go to sea, they make sure to take their storm shutters down and rest it there by the wind in case the storm comes. And in some cases, they put it up before they leave because they experienced Hurricane Andrew.
Yes.
Andrew caught them in the middle of the lobster season, and they didn't have enough time to get back to actually prepare for Andrew.
They had their guards down.
Yes, down, yes.
Yeah. Well, congratulations once again on writing a fantastic book.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. It's a pleasure.
And I tell people now that my library is now filled with, not filled, but there's a section in my library, the Wayne Neely section.
Yes.
And so we thank you so very much
again. It's a pleasure, and it's a pleasure to I must thank the Bahamian people for not only opening doors, but actually purchasing my books. And with that, it helps me to write the next one.
Good. Thank you so very much.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you very much for watching and listening to our program today with Wayne Neely. Every time he does a book, he comes on the platform to introduce it and to talk about it. And so we are very grateful to him. Thank you for watching and listening. Good evening, everyone.